What's up everybody? Today I'm doing a tutorial basically explaining how I made my Killington 2021 ski edit, which was my last video. I've had a bunch of people ask me to do a video talking about the settings that I use on my GoPros and how I color grade that footage to make it look as nice and as crisp as I did. So that's what our video is going to be about today. First, I'm going to talk about the settings that I use on the GoPros. I'm going to walk you through that, and then the next part of the video is going to be talking about importing it into Adobe Premiere Pro and color grading it from there. Okay, so I use the GoPro Hero 9. That's what I'm going to be basing all these settings off of. So if you go into your settings, so I'm going to go for this one for example. So most of my shots I film in 4K 30 linear. Now the reason for that is because filming in 4K is the quality that I upload to YouTube. So when I upload to YouTube, I upload in 4K, so I like to have the highest quality that I can. And then 30 FPS is because I make my videos in 24 frames a second, but having that 30 gives me those couple extra frames, so if I need to slow it down by just a tiny bit, I can do that. And then linear, for the lens, linear makes it nice and straight, makes it doesn't include any of that warping that you kind of see on the wide angle that GoPro is usually known for. So that is why I usually go for linear. Hyper smooth, for skiing you want to have the hyper smooth on because it makes it nice and stable, so that we don't have to have a gimbal. Next we have schedule capture, that can be off, no duration, hindsight doesn't matter, timer, zoom, you don't have to mess with any of that. Protune is where it gets interesting. So for Protune, one of your important ones is going to be your bit rate right here. So you're going to choose that and slide that all the way up to high. That's because you're going to have 100 megabytes per second, and that's just going to allow more information to be transmitted into your image, which allows it to be color graded easier in post, and it just looks so much nicer than if you have a low bit rate. Since I was shooting in 4K 30, the 180 rule would mean that I want my shutter to be 160 because that is twice as much as my 30 frames per second. However, when I film with my GoPros, I use the Polar Pro ND filters. So these are 3 filters that basically act as sunglasses on the GoPro. So if it's really bright out, I'll throw one of these on, and that way I can lock my settings in here and I don't have to mess them up, because this is how you get the most cinematic looking footage. So since I use these ND filters, if you have a low shutter speed on the ND filter, sometimes the hyper smooth will look a little weird. So that's why I set it to the next highest setting, which is 1/120. So if you're using the ND filters, 1/120 for 30 frames per second. If you're not using the filters, then do 1/60. EV comp, that is not as important. White balance, set your white balance to 5000 Kelvin. That puts it right in the middle and kind of helps, especially on the snow, because you don't want it to be too blue or too red. So having it 5000 kind of keeps it right in the middle. ISO, this is really important. You want to keep your ISO min 100 and your ISO max, this is supposed to be 200, there we go. So you want your ISO minimum to be 100 and your maximum 200. This is because the higher the ISO, the more grainy the footage will look, and this is exactly what you don't want if you want to have really high quality video. So since you have your ND filters on, you don't have to worry about like messing with your settings to make it brighter or darker, because your ND filter is going to be doing that for you. So that's why you put these settings as low as possible. I usually keep it between 100 and 200 because there's a little bit of wiggle room in case I change from like a darker environment to a lighter environment, but really you just want to have it no more than 200. Sharpness, I keep my sharpness at low because GoPro usually sharpens it a little too much in the footage, and it just makes it look really weird. So I turn it really low, and then when I go into post-production, into Adobe Premiere, I can add the sharpness back and add it however much I want. Color, again, this is another important one. You want your color in the GoPro to be flat because that will allow you to pull as much detail out of the image as possible in the shadows and the highlights, which allows you to edit in post and get the best colors. And then next is audio. It does not really matter, wind doesn't matter, and then the rest of this doesn't really matter as well. So for my basic shooting form, 4K 30, linear, those are the settings that I use. Now, if I want to shoot something slow-mo, I usually shoot right here in 2.7K. Let me pull that back up, hold on. So I do 2.7K, 120 frames a second. That 120 gives me plenty of room to work with so I can slow stuff down. And at the 2.7K, even if I'm making a video in 4K, I can upscale the 2.7K and it really doesn't look that much different than the 4K. Especially on YouTube because it gets processed, it's harder to figure out. So again, I'm using linear, hyper smooth on. The rest of these doesn't matter. Again, bitrate high, shutter, like I said. So normally if you're shooting at 120, you want to double that, so it'd be 240, but since I'm using the ND filters from Premiere Pro, I'm gonna make the shutter a little bit higher, so that way I can reduce any sort of like blurriness that might get messed up from the hyper smooth. So with a 120 frames per second, I shoot at 1/480th shutter. And then again, white balance is gonna be the same here. ISO, min, and max should also be the same. I don't know why it's changed. I think I might have played with it earlier, but there we go. 100 and 200. Sharpness, again, you want that low. Whoops. Sharpness, you want that low, and the color profile, you want that flat. And then the rest of this, it does not matter. So that is basically those are basically the settings that I use on the GoPros so that I can acquire the footage that I want to acquire, especially in the winter. And yeah, so again, I would really recommend getting these Premiere Pro filters because it really like makes a difference in your footage, because you'll be able to lock those exact settings while using these filters, and it just makes the footage look a lot cleaner. All right, so now that we talked about that, now I'm gonna go into Premiere, and we're gonna actually see how the footage looks and then how we're gonna color grade it. Once you load in Adobe Premiere Pro, it should look something like this. You want to import your clips down here. So I have just these 3 clips real quick right in here, nothing crazy. Okay, so what you want to do is first come up to this color panel right up here at the top, click that, and click the Lumetri scopes to set up your just how you're going to color grade this. So you can set this up any way you want, but I usually set up the vector scope, YUV, parade, RGB, waveform, Luma. That's just because that's what I use to kind of see how my color is doing with these two, and then how my whites and shadows and highlights are doing with these. Okay, so we're going to start on this first clip right here. You can kind of see this is just how the first clip is, raw. So that is straight out of the GoPro with the ND filter on. So this is basically the image that you get here. It looks really nice already, like that 4K already looks really good. But what we want to do is we want to edit it to start working on the color. So first, if we take a look at this area, we can see it kind of shows a lot. We got some shadows down here, we got some highlights up in the sky, and then we got the color from the pants and all of that. So I like to try to find an area that shows like almost all the different colors and stuff I'm going to be working with. So I think this is a really good one right here. Because that way I know exactly what the shadows will look like, what the highlights will look like, and etc. So come up here into your Lumetri tab and click Basic Correction, because we have to color correct before we can color grade. So click this little guy right here, make sure you're find something that's supposed to be white, and then make sure your white balance is all set. So as you can see, that just doesn't really make any sense, so you can kind of bring it back. You can find another part in the clip. The white balance should already be set pretty well. So yeah, like there's that right there. It looks pretty good. The whites are pretty white. All right. So exposure. This is when you want to look at your tone curves right here. Or not your tone curves, but your waveform. So you're gonna start playing with this to kind of get it, see how it looks. What you want to do is you want to make sure your shadows don't go below this 0 right here. So this line, you don't want any of these markers to go below that 0, because that means your shadow is too dark. And then up here, you don't want it to go above the 100. So, or you don't want it to clip the 100 like it is right now. See how it's kind of on this line right here. So this is what you don't want. So as you can see, our highlights are way too bright. They're blown out. So first things first, I'm gonna take these highlights down. You can kind of see it's pulling it down, but it's still up there. It's still kind of clipping it. So then I'm gonna pull the whites down. And as you can see, I pulled the white down, it pulled it away from the 100. Now the image isn't as what I blown out. So I'm gonna keep that real close because I want it to be white because it's winter. So I'm gonna keep it close to the 100 line, but I'm not gonna do it on it. And then I'm gonna kind of play with these highlights. I'm just gonna see personally what I like. I kind of like it like around here because I don't want it to be too dark, but I don't want it to be too bright. And then the contrast, like I said, you're gonna move that, and that should be good right around there. You can see my whites are still underneath the 100. We have plenty of space before we get to the shadows. So then let's go down here. I'm gonna darken these shadows up. You can kind of see how the blacks are getting really, really dark now. So you don't want it to be too dark because then it just doesn't necessarily look right. So I'm gonna kind of keep it right around here because then we can bring these blacks down a little bit and make the blacks specifically darker. You can kind of see we're getting close right here. So I'm gonna leave it a little bit above that. I don't want it to be too dark. So as you can see, this is what we have turned into so far. And if I click this little button here, you can see the before and after. So you can see we went from a flat image from the GoPro's color, and now we are on a more realistic looking image, I should say, sorry. I usually turn down the saturation to like 90, between 90 to 100. It's because I think 100 is a little too like punchy in the colors. GoPro usually saturates a little bit too much, so I'm gonna turn it down to about 91. And yeah, so that'll be our basic correctment for this clip. So going back to our first clip that we already got the basic color grading done, our color correction, I should say, sorry. We are going to now work on the color grade. So this is where you go into the creative panel right here. Oh, sorry. Actually, first, what I always do is throw an adjustment layer on top because I like to basically make sure that my color grades and my color corrections stay on different things, because if you edit it all in one layer and then you end up moving the layer around, then you can lose your color grade. So I like to keep them separate, but that is just me. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to basically cut the adjustment layer for every clip, because the correction is going to be a little bit different for every clip since they're not all lit the same. Okay, so as you can kind of see here, I have a whole bunch of LUTs right here, but the one that I'm going to be using for today is this Morgan Oliver Allen LUT. So I chose this LUT just because it has like a nice cool tone to it. So if I turn this all the way up, you can kind of see, get that nice teal and orange kind of look to it. So that's why I chose it. But obviously this color is like way too popped out. It's way too saturated. This doesn't look that good. So what I'm gonna do is slowly increase it little by little here until I get a look that I kind of like. So let's see, I'm gonna go back. So this is with the edit. Throw that to back there. I'm just gonna kind of scrub through. Okay. So just with the LUT applied and just going over like really basically, like just making sure it's not too pronounced. This is what the clip looks like. Already looks pretty sick, I'm not gonna lie, but it can definitely be better. So what we're gonna do here is add some sharpen. So I usually add no more than 15 in the sharpen category. This is what we add back after we take it away in the GoPro itself. Like I mentioned earlier, you're shooting that low sharpness. Then brightness and vibrance and saturation I don't really touch because I already have the colors the way that I want from the basic correction. and I already just like how this looks. But if you really wanted to, you could like turn down the saturation if you wanted, turn up the vibrance, kind of play with it like that. But I am not going to. Let's see. Next, we're gonna go to curves. So what I usually do is I make a 3-tone little curve here. That's what I like to call it. And I take this part right here, and I drag it down a little bit like that. As you can see, it kind of brings the shadows down a little bit, brings the blacks, makes them a little bit darker. I think it just adds a nice really like silky dark look to it. Next, we got all these other curves here. So this is kind of how this is what you use to kind of play with your colors specifically. So let's see, I guess I'll play with the yellow here. So let's say that this yellow is a little too yellow and I don't really want it to be that bright. So I'm going to choose Hue and Luma, because Hue is obviously the color we have here and Luma is brightness. So I'm going to take this little droplet, click on that yellow, it'll tell me the colors that I have right here, and then I'm going to take the middle one and I'm going to drag it down. You can kind of see it's getting darker, and if I drag it up, it gets brighter. So I'm going to kind of play with that a little bit, kind of find the area that I want. I don't want it to be too bright or too dark. Let's see, actually darker looks a little bit weird, so I'm going to make it a little bit brighter. I'm going to add another spot here so then I can take this down. See if that does anything. Not too much. Okay, so there we go. You can kind of see the before and after here. It's not much, but it's just a little bit, and it really does help. So now what I'm going to do here is Hue versus Hue. Oops. Hold on. Why is that not? There we go. So now click that. Again, it's going to give you this. I'm going to start to drag it. You can see it starts to change the color. So this is when I can start to get in here and start changing like the kind of hue of the color, because I don't really want it to be super yellow. I want it to have a little bit of orange to it, you know? So I'm going to start doing that. I'll bring it right around there. Let's see the before and after. There we go. You can see it has a little more of an orange, where this is more of a green. So now it's got a little bit more of the orange, and I kind of like that because it contrasts and offsets the blue that we have in the scene very well. I think it looks really nice. Honestly, this clip looks pretty solid the way it is right here. So this would end up being my final clip. Alright, so that's going to be the end of my tutorial. I really hope you guys took a lot from that. I kind of gave you the inside look at like the basics on how I edit personally. I didn't tell you like in super detail because that could go on for really long. I spent hours on my color grading, and it really is just a matter of trial and error. As you saw, not everything works for every clip, so you kind of got to go in there, tweak the settings, find what colors work for you, what lighting works for you, what settings, blah blah blah, what LUTs. It's really just trial and error. But the big thing that you want to take away is that you set up your GoPro settings correctly before you go into edit, because if your image just looks crappy right out of the camera, it's not going to look good when you try to play with the colors. And yeah, like I said, I really hope you guys liked it. If you want any more tutorials like this, I had a good time making it, so it's something different than my videos that I normally do. So if you guys want more, definitely drop a comment down below, let me know. I got some big stuff planned. Got a lot of videos coming for in the next couple weeks. Actually, probably more like a month, but I got some really cool videos coming, and I'm super stoked, and I hope you guys are just as excited as I am. But yeah, we'll close it off. Drop a comment, leave a like, subscribe, really helps me out, and I hope you guys are ready for all this content that's coming soon. Peace.